and welcome. My name is Shawn Ashworth, and I serve as co-chair for NEA's National Endowment for the Arts 2020 Big Read. Some of the things that we are exploring this year focuses on skin color, ethnic identity, what does it mean to be a citizen, and discrimination. For all our Zoom participants and Facebook Live audience, just in case you want to go back and review this discussion, we are thanking Asbury United Methodist Church this afternoon. We will be recording this discussion as well as broadcasting, as you can see, live on Facebook and on YouTube. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat box and we will address them accordingly. Those of you joining us on Facebook, please make sure you stay on mute, that is on Zoom. And I don't want anyone to be distracted from hearing and learning how to stop falling for the okey-doke as it relates to race. And we will have a Q&A before we close this afternoon. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing Reverend Stephen Tillett, or better known as Pastor T, as he shares his book, Stop Falling for the Okey-doke, How the Lie of Race Continues to Undermine Our Countries. This is a rousing call to a wake up for falling for the okey-doke. Pastor T has been pastoring for the past 27 years and is currently serving as the pastor of Asbury Broadneck, UMC. He's a community activist. He is the author of numerous columns and political commentary, and he is committed to the unification of the human family. Get ready, get ready. I don't want anybody to be distracted from hearing and learning how to stop falling for the okey-doke. In his book, he writes, until we reject the comfortable, familiar, unimaginative, and unproductive two-dimensional conversations we are having, we will never come to a place of mutual regard and mutual respect. That's a whole lot, Pastor T, whole lot. So as we get ready to hear the words of Pastor T and not falling for the okey-doke, get ready, y'all. You are in for a wonderful afternoon. So Pastor T, what does it mean to stop falling for the okey-doke?
Well, first, good afternoon, Shawn, and thank you for the introduction and everyone for joining us on this rainy, chilly first day in November. First, I just want to give you a little definition of what okey-doke is. It's not really that complicated. Okey-doke is a hustle. It's a scam. It's nonsense. It's foolishness. And so when I say stop falling for the okey-doke, essentially what I'm saying is stop falling for things that are demonstrably untrue. Stop falling for nonsense and scam in the sense that there is a purpose, that there is malicious intent to use it the way that it is used to harm our society. As I say, we are undermining our country by perpetuating this lie of race. Race is a social construct. We'll get to that, but it has no basis in science. And that's why we need to stop falling for the okey-doke.
So you talked about race. And so in chapter 2, by the way, I loved your book. I mean, I haven't read a book in a long time, and I think I read that in 2 days, probably a day and a half. But in chapter 2, you are adamant about that there is only one race, the human race. Talk to us more about race being a social concept versus a scientific one.
Okay. What I'd like to do is start with a quote from a popular movie. For those of you who might have seen the movie Black Panther, it's at the very, very end of the movie when King T'Challa and his woman, his fiance, and the general and other bodyguards, you know, because they had those bad sisters that were handling business, and he only needed 2 to protect him. And he goes and he speaks at the UN, and here's what he said. Now more than ever, the illusion of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe. And so just that really resonated with me, Sean, that is like the illusion of division, or I wrote down, it says parenthetically, the illusion of difference, that there are things that people allege are differences or divisions between us, and it's just not there. Now, in the context of what scientists have said, because that's what I did, I kind of examined, you know, Sean, if things don't make sense to me, then I kind of do the research so I can figure out what the truth is as opposed to what I'm hearing. And given what we're living through in 2020, we know often there's a difference between what the truth is and what we're hearing.
Yes.
And so just a short excerpt from chapter 2 in the book. According to the popular and widely accepted narrative, there are 3 races of people on the planet: Mongoloid, people of Asian descent; Africoid, people of African descent; Caucasoid, people of Caucasian descent. Over the years, people with more of a socio-economic agenda under the guise of fake science have erected barriers between members of the human family based on the false notion of race. I state emphatically something that's not a new truth, yet it continues to be widely ignored because there's no continuing financial advantage to the wealthy or the business community in this truth. There is only one race, the human race. So unless you are a Vulcan or a Klingon or Romulan, you're a human being. There's one race, the human race. That's it. There are ethnicities within the human family, branches of the family, if you will, but to assert that white people or brown people or so-called yellow or red are so genetically different as to be another race of human beings is absurd, and it is not supported by science. And I just quote, Sean, as you saw in chapter 2, various physicians and scientists, people who have forgotten more about science than we will ever know. And they have said some of the same things. Who was that? Race is a social concept, not a scientific one. And that was Dr. J. Craig Venter, the head of the Celera Genomics Corporation in Rockville. There was something called the Genome Project, where they studied the human genome, our DNA. And after all the study, they conclude, drum roll please, that the difference between, as my dad would have called him, the blue-black brother in the heart of Africa, from the palest white brother or sister in, I don't know, Iceland, let's say, is less than 1/10 of 1% of our DNA. Wow. Our DNA is 99.9% plus the same. And then out of that less than 1/10 of 1%, we get, you know, everybody don't have good hair like I do. You know, we get, you know, the wavy hair, the kinky hair, the straight hair, your nose, your skin color, whatever. And then a lot of that also, because scientists will also point out that everyone on the planet emerged from Africa. We started there.
Yes.
And even if you look at the Bible, and it talks about the Garden of Eden, and there are 4 rivers that are mentioned: the Pihon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. The Pihon and Gihon are the blue and white Nile. Where's the Nile?
In Africa.
Okay. So we started in Africa. Every person on the planet is a descendant of Africa. Over the course of generations, people have dispersed and gone to different parts of the planet. And so those of us with browner skin is because of needing protection from the ultraviolet rays. Those with lighter skin needed more access to sun rays for vitamin D to protect them from rickets and other things of that nature. All of those are adaptations, but we are 99.9% the same. Dr. Eric Lander, a geneticist, said there's no scientific evidence to support substantial differences between groups. And the tremendous burden of proof goes to anyone who wants to assert those differences. So somebody who wants to say, no, we're all the way different, they need to prove it.
So basically,
and they need to be able to come up with some science to prove it, not just something they heard from Pop.
So basically, we all have the same blood. We all have the same blood. And so, but we are experiencing prejudices, we are experiencing inequities because people have socially, that social construct, have said that we are different, but actually we are all one and the same.
Right.
Wow.
And Sean, let me just to point out the utter ridiculousness of this. There were two examples. One I cited in the book. You saw that there were twins who were born, twin girls born in England, and one of the parents was biracial, bi-ethnic, I call it. I don't refer to, because since race is a false concept, I use the word ethnic. I don't use racism, I use ethnicism. So these two babies born, baby girls, were bi-ethnic, of bi-ethnic parents. One of them, she seemed to draw her skin tone, hair texture, etc., from her mother, who was European. The other drew her skin tone and hair texture from her father, who was bi-ethnic. So she was brown. Her twin sister, 9 months in the same womb, same mother, same father. And the article in the paper, Sean, said, two babies of different races, twins of different races born. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. So we're gonna try and separate twins at birth based on
different races.
They got the same parents.
Yeah.
And then here's the other thing. So our indigenous population in the United States, Native Americans, so-called Indians, the common understanding is that folks who were from Asia migrated from Asia across the Bering Strait area, which was frozen 10, 20,000 years ago, into the Americas and eventually North and South America. So follow me, work with me. So when they left Asia, they would have been yellow. They become Indians, so-called Indians, they get called red.
Red.
They go south of the border, now they brown and Latino. And these are the same people. The same people. Brown, yellow to red to brown, and they were brown all along.
So Pastor T, so as a minister, how do you feel about ethnicism and its impact on the church?
Ethnicism and its impact on the church. Nah, you're meddling.
Come on, preach to us, preach to us.
Good for you. So people have used the Bible to essentially lie on God and lie on religion, again, but it causes division. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In the Bible, people will say that because of the curse of Ham, the so-called curse of Ham, Ham being one of the three sons of Noah, that brown people are going to be subject to the servants of their other brothers. The problem with that is that there is no curse of Ham in the Bible. But that's called, what did they say? Reading is fundamental?
Reading is fundamental.
So you have to read what it says. And there is no curse of Ham. There's a curse of Canaan. And it's not a curse pronounced by God, but it was a curse pronounced by an angry grandfather with a hangover. But because people wanted to use it as justification for mistreating a large swath of the human family, they chose to talk about a curse of Ham. There was no curse of Ham. Noah was mad at Canaan, not Ham, and he said so. Then there's Cain. Remember Cain and Abel? Cain killed his brother Abel. God
Jealousy.
Puts him out, sends him on his way. And Cain says, well, if you send me out there, folks are going to kill me. I'm by myself. And so God put a mark of protection on him. Not a mark of cursing, but a mark of protection to let folks know if you mess with him, you got to deal with me. Now, if being brown-skinned is a mark of protection, then I'm sure Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, most of us, we want to know, well, when does the protection kick in? It was never a mark of cursing. That was nonsense. And then think about, Paul in Acts 21:38. Because people, it's almost as if they approach, Sean, the Bible story as if it occurred in Europe. Most of it occurred in Africa.
Yes, it did.
And so Paul is going somewhere and he's preaching, and somebody asks him, are you the Egyptian? Now, I don't know if any of you have been to Egypt, but I have. And when I went to Egypt, I felt like I was at the family reunion.
I love it.
So I don't know where they get it, but all that to say that brown skinned folk in Africa are all up in the Bible because it started there. The Bible is a story that initiates, that begins, has its genesis literally in Africa. Excuse me. And here's the other thing. You'll remember in Matthew chapter 2 that Herod wants to kill this newborn king that he's heard about. And the angel comes to Joseph at night and says, get up, take the mother and the child and go where? Escape to Egypt. Now, if I wanted to hide out somewhere, would I go to Norway to hide out? Because you'd go, yo, anybody seen a 6'2" brown dude somewhere? Oh yeah, he's right over there. So these paintings that we've seen, largely crafted during the Renaissance, and Jesus and Mary and Joseph are just the palest, blondest things. And I don't have anything against white people or blonde people. But why would an angel send 3 lily white people to hide out in Egypt? That don't make no sense. You hide out somewhere where you can be on the DL and nobody knows you're there.
Correct. Don't want to be found.
Right. You do not want to be found. So those are areas where scripture has been contorted, lied on, basically, to create a narrative, to support a narrative that then gives people what they feel is divine permission, if you will, to mistreat brothers and sisters of different ethnicities. And it's just not true. It is OKEYDOKE.
It is OKEYDOKE. And you make reference to several passages in your book about even back during the slave time, where the masses would allow us to read certain parts of the Bible that fit their need and for our purposes, their purposes, for us to work in the fields. And so I can see the OKEYDOKE from way back whence we came.
Right.
So, I'm going to get hot and heavy because it is the time of, we got an important date coming up on Tuesday, November 3rd. So
let the church say amen. November 3rd is here. Whatever happens, we're going to be done with this leg of the chapter, this part of the chapter soon.
That's right. So let's talk about this social concept of race and the impact or the effect that it has had on government. How has the human ethnicity or social concept of race had an effect on government?
So ethnicity is all up in government because you have had people who have enacted policies specifically to injure or hinder or hold in check, at bay, certain members of our community. There's a book called The Color of Law, written by Mr. Rothstein. I don't remember his first name. And what he does is he lays out a detailed history of how laws were crafted such that, for instance, in housing, because largely he's dealing with housing, communities would be segregated. Government-built housing would be segregated. This became especially significant during the World War II era, and you have factories springing up and people needing to go into wartime production. And since there were so many members of Congress and the Senate who had seniority, who were from the southern states, the former Confederacy, they were committee chairs. And so what they did is they made sure that they inserted language for segregation, that any money coming from the federal government, what was produced from it, had to be segregated. So think about that for a minute. Let's talk about cancer. So let's say there's no such thing as knee cancer, I don't think. But let's say you had cancer in your knee and you took some of the cancer cells out of your knee and decided you were going to put them in your lung and in your neck or your ear or something like that. That's what that was, that they had the cancer of Jim Crow in the South, and then they codified it into law and spread it all over the country. So people who had been living in community for years, and now all of a sudden, because some Southern legislator says any federal money has got to be segregated. We're not going to pay for anything that's not segregated. They then assert and insert segregation to other parts of the country.
Wow.
Another
Wow.
area, of course, is voting rights, where as a result of wanting to hinder the votes of people who were not going to support their agenda, they created suppression. And the interesting thing, or the sad thing, frankly, is some of it are, some people are now referring to it as Jim Crow 2.0, that they are engaging in suppression again. There was a court case in 2010, I believe it was, Holder versus, the other escapes me, but Eric Holder was the Attorney General. And what that did is it gave the Supreme Court, which was then a conservative majority Supreme Court, the opportunity to strip away the enforcement teeth out of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So there was a paragraph 4, paragraph 5. Well, paragraph 5 doesn't work without paragraph 4. And paragraph 4 were the enforcement teeth, such that there had to be pre-clearance. So before any jurisdiction that had a history of racial segregation, voter suppression. Yeah, we have a jar of jelly beans here. How many jelly beans are in the jar? You tell us that, you give us the right answer, and we'll let you register to vote. Or grandfather clause. If your grandfather was eligible to vote, you can vote.
Wow.
Well, your grandfather was probably enslaved. So guess what? You don't get to vote. Literacy test, all manner of things. So they put things in the law, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that states needed pre-clearance to make any changes to their voting regulations. 2010, the case in the Supreme Court, and they take the enforcement technique measures out, and Sean, before the ink was dry on that Supreme Court ruling, states all around the country start to reinsert suppression measures, voter suppression measures, usually voted upon by Republican state legislatures. So, and it's not all in the South. Wisconsin, Republican state legislature, they inserted some voter suppression. Pennsylvania, they inserted voter suppression. Michigan, et cetera. It's like they do everything they can to keep people from voting. And so essentially what that tells me is, you know, that if there is a fair election, the more people who vote, the worse you're going to lose. So rather than lose, as I put out a hashtag a while ago, hashtag if you can't win, cheat. And so if you know you're going to lose, rather than lose, you just cheat, you put your thumb on the scale, you make it harder for young people to vote. And so in some states, a gun license is a verifiable ID to vote and register to vote, but a student ID from a state university is not.
Yes.
Really? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense unless you don't want young people to vote.
Exactly.
So those are ways. And Sean, while we're on it, there's something that Dr. King in 1963, after the Selma to Montgomery March, that they are in Montgomery, Alabama, and he makes a speech. Everybody, the only thing they know about Dr. King is "I Have a Dream" speech, right? Because that's a very comfortable and safe speech.
Use that. Say that again. Comfortable safe.
And safe. Yes. You know, the four little, my four children, and Black girls and white girls will be able to join hands. And, all that's good, and that's an objective. But listen to his 1967 speech at Riverside Church, and literally April 4th, 1967, literally 1 year before he was assassinated. And in that speech, he attacks 3 isms that are holding our country back: racism, materialism, and militarism. He came right for the U.S. government on that. Lyndon Johnson was furious. A lot of people were like, look, you should just be talking about Negroes. Shut up, and then some people in the Black community turned on him. That was their chance, those who were jealous of him. Okay, and then he didn't become universally a subject of adulation until he was martyred. All right, but all that to say that he would come for them and give some history. So at this march, when they have the rally in Montgomery, and he says racial segregation as a way of life did not come about as a natural result of hatred between the races immediately after the Civil War. There were no laws segregating the races then. Then he quotes from a book called The Strange Career of Jim Crow by C. Vann Woodward, and talks about how because the Democratic Party, and let's get that, the Democratic Party, the Southern Democratic Party, those folk after the Voting Rights Act left and became Republicans. So all they did is they changed horses. They're still there.
That's right.
But the Democratic Party were the ones suppressing votes, et cetera. And so the Bourbon Democrats, the business community, they did whatever they could to keep brown people and white people separated. He goes on to explain it was a simple thing to keep the poor white masses working for near starvation wages in the years that followed the Civil War. If the poor white plantation or mill worker became dissatisfied with his low wages, the plantation or mill worker would merely threaten to fire him and hire former Negro slaves and pay him even less. Thus, the Southern wage level was kept almost unbearably low. But into this time period, into this context, emerges a fusion movement, a populist party, and that was poor whites and poor brown people together coming for the people with the money who were repressing, suppressing all of them so that they could keep getting paid. That's what this is, folks. At the end of the day, it's all about money. Follow the money. And so as they start coming together, then King said, to meet this threat, the Southern aristocracy began immediately to engineer the development of a segregated society. Through their control of mass media, they revised the doctrine of white supremacy. They directed the placement on the books of the South, laws that made it a crime for Negroes and whites to come together as equals at any level.
Wow.
And so as a result of that, whites and browns who were getting together in a populist movement to gain better wages were divided so that could not happen.
Wow.
And so President Lyndon Johnson, later on, somebody asked him about why poor middle-class whites voted against their own interests. Basically, we're gonna keep Black people down, so that's okay. And he said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't know you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him someone to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. So that it's like a mind game that was played such that after a while, white people voted against their own interests. And you probably saw in the book, Sean, about Owsley County, Kentucky, one of the poorest counties in the country. They continually send Republicans to Congress who vote against their interests. So you're represented or misrepresented, not represented by somebody that doesn't even care for your interests. And you got some of the highest poverty rates in the country.
Wow. So I'm concerned then because we do have a government that in so many ways has divided the nation. And you write in your book, as long as our nation continues to be divided by skin color, regardless of our collective needs or interests or what is in the best interest of the country, the political process will continue to fail us. Some deep thoughts.
That is correct. And that is skin color. And then it's also the whole blue-red thing. Democrat, Republican. And frankly, the emerging largest voting population in the country, there are more and more independents every year. And so you see the numbers of Democrats and Republicans coming down, yet the Democrats and Republicans are content to have two-wing, same bird conversation all the time. But as a result of that, you have people voting against their own interests. So you have people who are Republicans who would refuse to sign up for the Affordable Care Act because that president from Kenya is the one who proposed it.
Proposed it. Ooh, we're in trouble. So
you need health insurance, but
Yes.
you're not going to take it because the black guy is the one whose administration got it done. Really?
Yes. Yeah.
You and your children need insurance, but you don't want it because it didn't come from. That's just. I said I wasn't going to use the word stupid today. That
ridiculous. Ridiculous.
It's okey-doke, but it's self-destructive. It's self-destructive and short-sighted. And so as a result, we continue to remain divided, whether it's skin color or nation of origin and the language you speak, the religion you practice, who you love, political party, region of the country. There's just division after division after division.
And then we have those folks, and you reference in your book, but we have those folks who say, "Oh, I don't see color. I'm not racist. I'm not biased. I don't see color. I treat all people." And in your book, you talk about this idea of perceptual blindness. Is that the same as what we often hear people say, "I don't see color"? What is perceptual blindness?
Well, I don't see color, first of all, is you got something wrong with your eyes. I know what they're trying to say. What they're trying to say is that they don't make evaluations or value judgments about people based on the color of their skin. That's what they're trying to say. But please don't say that you don't see color, because if somebody asked you, have you seen so-and-so? Well, who's that? Well, brown guy with a white shirt and, oh yeah, the tall black guy. Yeah, I saw him. He went down there and around the corner. So you do see color.
Yes.
And it is your color, your skin color is an ontological fact. It is what it is. But the problem comes in when we allow that to divide us to the point where it becomes, so people should never say they don't see color. They should say instead that the person's skin color, language of origin, religion, whatever, does not matter to them. In other words, I interact with you based on who you are, not on your skin color.
I like that.
And you know that in education particularly, there's been this whole thing about tolerance.
Yes.
And so tolerance is not really a good word to use. I want to just read a little excerpt because I have a few pages on tolerance versus inclusion.
Inclusion, yes.
A huge disservice that is perpetrated upon people who think they want to become more open and welcoming to people of other ethnicities is the use of the word tolerance. Tolerance has been defined as, quote, the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior one does not necessarily agree with. Tolerance, further, is the act or capacity of enduring or suffering something. So when we use the word tolerance, we're going through the act, and acts are often not authentic, of enduring something or suffering something. I'm going to endure your distinctiveness and your differences from me. I'm going to suffer or tolerate your ethnicity and your culture. Well, isn't that big of me? And I'm going to tolerate and suffer you.
Right.
Tolerance is also defined as the ability to accept, experience, or survive something harmful or unpleasant. So you can see why the word tolerance is wrong. Instead, I suggest the word inclusion is more appropriate, because tolerance is the attitude of the higher toward the lower. We will tolerate you. We will suffer your experience, your differences, your uniqueness. Instead, inclusion goes beyond any assessment of judgment phase of others and moves right to my receiving you as you, simply because you are, period. Inclusion means we include, we comprehend, we comprise, we embrace. We don't keep you over there or create a special section where it's safe for you to express your uniqueness and distinctiveness. We welcome you to be with us and to be a part of us. As the Borg said in Star Trek, your distinctiveness will be added to our collective. That's what we need to do. Whatever distinctiveness you bring, whoever you are, we need to add it to our collective, rather than, well, you can join the collective, but you can't bring that part with you.
Right.
And for those of you who like the show, This Is Us, they had the season premiere last week. And the Black son in the family really speaks for the first time about some things that he's like, there are things I just couldn't even speak on. I had to keep to myself because I didn't want to make you all uncomfortable. Because his sister was like, yeah, this stuff is getting bad. And he's like, it's always been bad. So that no one should ever feel as though they have to keep a part of themselves away, hidden, unexpressed. People should feel free to be who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now you asked about inattentional blindness.
Yes.
It has been said that much of our disconnect from one another is caused by inattentional blindness. That is also known as perceptual blindness. It is, quote, a psychological lack of attention that is not associated with any vision defects or deficits. So again, I don't see color. Well, unless you have a vision defect or deficit, you do see color. Stop saying that. But it may be further defined as the event in which an individual fails to recognize an unexpected stimulus that is in plain sight. It is the failure to notice a fully visible but unexpected object because attention was engaged or otherwise, or another task or event or object. I used as the illustration the story about the Tuskegee Airmen, the 332nd Division in the Army Air Corps, all Black pilots. And so there was a instance when they were in the air and the Tuskegee Airmen come and fly cover for the bombers so they can accomplish their mission. And so one of the pilots wants to go to and thank the pilots and bring them something, you know, some alcohol to thank them and congratulate them. And he gets to where the 332nd is based, and all he sees is brown people.
Yes.
And he says, no, we're in the wrong place. And his co-pilot, and he's from Texas, the pilot. The co-pilot's from California. He says, but I saw him out the window. These are the guys. He said, no, I'm telling you, I grew up in Texas. Say you can't throw a rock without hitting a nigger in Texas. In Lubbock, you can't throw a rock without hitting one. And there wasn't no niggers flying in planes. So he had inattentional blindness, and beyond that, cognitive dissonance. His mind could not accept the plain fact in plain view right before his eyes that those brown pilots saved his behind in the air. His plane came back. They accomplished their bomb run, came back unscathed because of the work of the Black pilots. But he just couldn't get his mind to accept it. That is inattentional blindness, which leads to cognitive dissonance, where you have a core belief that is so strong that when you're presented with evidence that works against what you believe, the new evidence cannot be accepted. That's one of the main problems we have right now in the country with, let's say, Corona. that because you have decided you're tired of wearing a mask, you're done with the virus isn't done with you, but you're done with the virus, so you're going to take your mask off, you're going to go to a motorcycle gathering up in Sturgis, South Dakota with 250,000 people, most of them not masked. You're going to go to these rallies with no mask. You're going to go to restaurants and sports bars with no mask. That is cognitive dissonance, that because you prefer to listen from Donald Trump rather than Anthony Fauci, you just refuse. It's like, la, 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 la. You refuse to accept what makes common sense. And so as a result, the United States now, I think the other day we had over 90,000 people get infected in one day. We have over 1,000 a day dying. We are 4.2% of the world population and almost 20% of the infections and almost 20% of the deaths. We did it to ourselves. And because of cognitive dissonance, until we buy a vowel and get a clue, it's going to continue to happen.
So you've done a lot. You have informed and educated us. Let's see if we have any questions from our chat box. Michelle?
Yes. I'm sorry. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
there's one question. D. Rowell is asking the question. question. She asked, how do you explain the actions of Ice Cube, 50 Cent, and Lil Wayne and their support for Trump in context to historical events of the past? She corrected, historical events where Blacks support leaders against our interests.
Thank you. Pastor T, I can't answer that.
Okay, so I'm doing my best to restrain myself. I don't use the hashtag Coon Alert. I'm not going to do that. I won't go there. But those three individuals are people who have been able to advance themselves personally and financially, artistically, beyond the communities that they came from. And so now they are people who are in a higher tax bracket. And so while, for instance, the changes to the tax bracket that Joe Biden is proposing will not affect anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year, I'm assuming it's going to affect all of them. And so particularly for Lil Wayne and 50 Cent, for them, it's about the tax bracket issue. They don't want to pay more taxes. But if you make more, you pay more. That's just the way that works, unless you're Donald Trump and you pay $750. But which, you know,
play nice, play nice.
In my pocket for a number of years, I'm writing them a check, $500 a month to get them off my back. And he paid $750 for the whole year. So it was a financial decision for them. Then D, there's also the matter of misinformation. So people want to say that Joe Biden, all by himself, he was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee in the 1990s, but Joe Biden, Senator Biden from Delaware, all by himself wrote the crime bill. And so whatever mass incarceration that came out of that, et cetera, they want to put it all on him. Let's understand that a majority of the Congressional Black Caucus supported the 1994 crime bill, that Black mayors and state legislators and everywhere else, they were supporting the crime bill because if you remember 1994, there was a crack epidemic where people were being killed all over the place, and they wanted the crime to stop. So they wanted people who were repeatedly committing these acts to get arrested, get convicted, and go to jail so our communities could be safer. But in addition, there are other things in the crime bill that nobody talks about. They focus on the one thing, and obviously mass incarceration was a huge negative that Joe Biden has since said that was a mistake. We didn't do it the right way. We need to try and make people whole that were injured from it and reverse some of the harm that was in there. For instance, greater criminal penalties for crack cocaine as opposed to powdered cocaine. It's all cocaine, but crack cocaine had like 10 times the sentencing penalty than powder cocaine. So they tried to level those things out. But in addition to that, in the crime bill of 94 also was protections for violence against women, protections for children who were victims of violence, either physical violence or sexual violence, keeping statistics on how some police departments perform their duties with respect to interacting with communities of color, et cetera. So there were other things that were in there that were not harmful or injurious. But Vice President Biden has said, we made some mistakes. Now, here's the other thing. The vote in the Senate, there are 100 people in the Senate, y'all, 100. The vote was 95-4 in favor of that crime bill. And that includes the two liberal icons who were representing Maryland at the time, Paul Sarbanes and Barbara Mikulski. And I think Kwesi Mfume, who was our representative in Congress at the time, he voted for it also. Again, a majority of the Black caucus. So this was a mistake that was not just on Bill Clinton, not just on Joe Biden. A whole lot of people supported it. Now is the time to fix it. And then folks get upset at Kamala Harris, because as a prosecutor, she put some people in jail. if you commit crimes and you get caught, you're supposed to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
She was doing her job. It's not like she
Absolutely.
was running out saying, oh, get that one and grab that one and grab that one. No, but her office as a prosecuting office did their job. And if people committed crimes, they went to jail. But they don't talk about the fact that there's some other things she did to try and keep families together, to lessen penalties for lower level crimes, because of course people have, legislators have made marijuana, like some kind of demon drug, and people need to go to jail forever for weed, while weed is being legalized in other areas of the country. Now, I've never smoked weed, but I've never wanted to put anybody in jail for smoking it either.
Right. So let we as Blacks, we often talk about the work, the effort that goes into just being who we are, right? We always talk about we got to work harder, we got to do better, we got to work 10 times better than our white counterpoints. And in the book, you quote an NAACP leader who at a national convention said, being Black in America is exhausting. And you also reference, as you talked about, because I watched This Is Us as well. And we know that Randall often used similar words. Being Black in America is exhausting. What are your thoughts about that statement?
Sean, I'm going to try and help our white cousins get that concept. And by the way, we're all cousins. Everybody on the planet is 30th to 50th cousins with everybody else. So we cousins.
Yes.
So do you know how you're feeling right now as a result of all of the every day with COVID?
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting.
It's tiring.
Or all of the non-governmental, nonsensical things that emerge from this current administration. And it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
White supremacists in Charlottesville. Well, there were good people on both sides. Stand back and stand by. And all of those things. And it's exhausting. Y'all are tired. You're like, I don't know what happened to my country, but I want it back because this is some foolishness. I just want to be able to sit back and breathe and exhale and just not have to deal with nonsense on a daily basis like I have for the last almost 4 years. Now, magnify that, multiply that beyond 4 years. I'm 60 years old. I know I don't look it. I look much better and much younger than 60. But
you look wonderful. You look wonderful.
I'm 60 years old.
They say Black don't crack.
That's right. That's right. But I've been dealing with this for 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
My mama is 96 upstairs. She's been dealing with this for almost 100 years.
Wow.
So for however tired you are from 8 months of COVID or 3.5 years of Donald Trump, multiply that by however old Black people that you know are. And they're the microaggressions or micro insults, and then the macro. I might be in the store, shopping, looking for something, and somebody's following me around. Like I'm gonna try and shoplift something. Like, first of all, whatever I want to buy here, I can pay for. Matter of fact, I can buy something for you if you want. So there's just things of that nature, and then assumptions that people make. My father was a teacher and counselor and assistant principal and educator. And so there was at some point when he made some presentation at a meeting and somebody told him, they thought they were paying a compliment, Sean. You might have heard this before. Oh, you were so articulate. They don't say that to, now they notice inarticulation in white people, like when somebody like George W. Bush talks about strategery instead of strategy, they get on him for that. But no, they don't tell somebody who just speaks regular English, you were articulate. You got a PhD. I hope you are articulate.
I hope you are.
So those are just micro things that every day And, you know, that somebody takes this person in line before they take you. And of course, let's not forget treatment by police. And so that it seems that when a white person commits a crime or is suspected of committing a crime, that they manage to subdue them or arrest them without injuring them.
Yes.
In the case of the massacre at Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina, they took the boy by Burger King to get something to eat before they took him to jail.
Sad, but our
Now,
reality.
if that had been my son, he'd have been lying in a pool of blood on the sidewalk. They would not have even tried to arrest him in most cases. And so that's why it is so exhausting. That's why the Black Lives Matter movement came into being, because it seemed as though there was just a rapid succession of African Americans being killed, many of them unarmed, killed by the police. And because of this thing called qualified immunity, the police can basically say, I feared for my life, and get away. I remember a scene, I think it was in Oklahoma. They were on a highway, and there was this white female cop, and there was a black man who had been driving his car, and he got out of the car, and she's giving him orders, and he's not responding. But the way he is walking, it's almost like he was having some kind of diabetic episode or some kind of medical incident. He wasn't focusing on anything. He wasn't responding to anything, but he wasn't aggressive and doing anything either. And he walked kind of in her direction for a while, and then he turned around and walked away from her, and she shot him in the back and killed him and got away with it. And he had not caused her any threat, any harm. They didn't even try a taser first, which is the problem that just happened a few days ago, that the young man got shot. And they didn't say, well, no, they didn't have tasers. And I want to know, tasers ought to be as much of a standard procedure for police as a gun, so that you have the non-lethal weapon that you can pull out before you use the lethal one. But Black Lives Matter. So in the postscript of the book, since there was so much going on in 2016 when I was finishing the book, and I just added a little bit in it, there was a law professor who had worn a Black Lives Matter shirt to class when he was teaching. And so he got an anonymous letter or email, whatever, complaint about him wearing.
Yes, I remember reading that. Yes.
And he said, Black Lives Matter is not about exclusion. It's about focus. We are focusing attention on the community that is suffering the greatest harm because they're suffering the greatest harm. And so in the book I said, so in the same way as between the late 1930s and the mid 1940s, a Jewish Lives Matter movement would have been appropriate, because Jews were being slaughtered in the Holocaust in Europe. Why? Not because Jewish lives were more important than anybody else, but because they were the victims of genocide. In the United States, the indigenous population, so-called Native Americans, have been the victims of genocide. African Americans, it seems as though there's it's hunting season for us. In fact, I have something that I found somebody pulled out, I don't know, they're probably their great grandfather's effects or something. And Sean, it was literally, it said, nigger hunting license.
Wow.
So that people
that
could hunt
existed?
us legally. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, could hunt us legally. And now they act like they can. So you got, and so that's why, for instance, the state Supreme Court in Michigan overturning what the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State in Michigan said, we don't want any guns in the polling places. And for some reason, they've decided that Second Amendment rights have to prevail because you need your gun to vote. But for people, for communities that are always exhausted and always, you got to give your kids the talk. Right. Thank you. Somebody just put in the chat. Yeah, they want their gun, but they don't want to wear a mask.
But they don't want to wear a mask.
They can figure that out. So that they want to come to the polling places in fatigues. Now, I have fatigues in the house, but I earned mine because I was in the United States Air Force for 20 years. But you have some people that went to Sunny Surplus and got theirs, and then they go and run around in the woods with their friends, and they claim they're a militia, and they're not. And then they want to walk around with guns over their shoulders or on their hip. And so that can be seen as intimidating by some people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as some of our cousins know and understand, you go in the wrong neighborhood, you can have a couple guns over your shoulders, you're still going to be outgunned. So that's probably not a good idea. But just it's not necessary.
Absolutely.
But all of that, so into communities that have already been oppressed, already being over-policed, already being overshot and overkilled, and then you're going to let a bunch of yahoos come in fatigues and stand near your polling places. That's why Black Lives Matter. It's a matter of focus and not exclusion.
Thank you for educating us. I know we have some more. Our chat is starting to blow up. We have another question in the chat. Michelle?
Yes, this is coming from Sister Peggy. In chapter 2, you reference several quotes that speak to the need for truth. Can you speak to which one resonates with you the most?
Oh, all of them are in there because they all resonated with me. The one that immediately comes to mind is the one from the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York. And he said, "You have the right to your own opinion, but not to your own facts." And so it was troubling to me when I heard Kellyanne Conway say back in 2017 something about alternative facts. And that laid the groundwork for 4 years of exhaustive nonsense. There's no such thing as alternative facts. 2 + 2 is 4. You might want it to be 3 or 6 or 19. 2 + 2 is 4. There is no such thing as alternative facts. If you have people that have forgotten more about science than you will ever know, telling you wear a mask, socially distant, wash your hands, stay home, don't go to bars, sorry, don't go to church, stop having these big weddings, sorry, you can't go to grandma and pop-pop's house for Thanksgiving, too many people, you don't want it to become a super spreader event, and you decide that your freedoms are more important than common sense. Mm-hmm. So you want to be free to go about your life, not wear a mask, get infected, it's on you. And truly, 97%, 98% of people who get COVID recover, but then some of them are what they call long haulers, and they're dealing with effects of COVID for years, no, not for years, but for months afterward, even though they no longer are right in the middle of it, no longer intubated or whatever. Those are facts. Yeah, Michelle said facts are exactly like science. Yes, exactly. Yes, facts are like science. And so you have a right to your own opinion, not your own facts. And then I like this one by Soren Kierkegaard. He said there are two, I'm in the book, by the way. It's not coming up. Let me pull it back. Okay, I got the background. It's a little funny. But anyway, he said there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. And so right now we've got a probably 40% or close to 40% of our country who not only don't accept facts, they believe what's not true, and they absolutely refuse to believe what is true because of whatever cognitive dissonance. They just don't want to hear it. It's not convenient. It's not what they want to hear, so they don't accept it.
So we're almost winding down, but I wanted to get this question in. I'm an educator, I'm a counselor, and we often talk about mental health, and we often talk about trauma and drama and all those things that are ruining our children. And so in your book, you talk about in 1959, the President's Joint Council on Mental Health in Children defined racism as the #1 mental health problem among children in the United States. when I read that, I was like, really? I mean, there's so many things that we talk about today about mental health and the support and just all the environmental things that cause it. And so in 1959, they said that racism was one of the #1 mental health problems among children. Do you believe that sentiment? Do you believe that statement still applies today?
It absolutely applies today. And I just want to give you a little context. 1959 was the year that I was born.
Oh, wow.
At the end of the Eisenhower administration. And here we are heading into 2021, and it's still a problem. And let's understand that children are not born with that disability. It does not come to them normally.
Absolutely.
Or naturally, but they hear it at the kitchen table. They hear it at home, and then they bring it with them to school, to the community, to the bus stop, etc. And that's where, and for them, so I got to go there for a minute. So if they speak nigganese at home, nigga, they speak nigganese at home. And then you expect that when they get to the bus stop to get ready to go to school, that all of a sudden they can just, there's an off switch. They can turn that off. No, they're going to go to school and continue to speak it and act on it and cause problems. And one of the things about Anne Arundel County, and in a lot of counties in the country, but I'm talking about Anne Arundel County right now, and especially one area that we had a lot of challenges was in Pasadena.
I live there.
Okay, well,
26 years.
The Lord be with you. And so they were having issues with the schools and kids just acting out. But they learned that at home. That's one thing Dr. Arlotto says, you know, we take the kids that you all bring to us, that you send us, but some of the stuff you send them with is not appropriate. That's one of the reasons why you all started the Global Citizenship course, to give our children a greater understanding of what the world is like beyond the borders of Anne Arundel County.
Absolutely.
Because unless you plan on living here your whole life, you join the military, say something wrong. You're going to be gathering your teeth up in a napkin because you said something wrong to the wrong person, you know, or you're going to look up and all the wrong people are going to have things on their shoulders, and the only answer you can give them is yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. So the Global Citizenship course is designed to help give a broader worldview and understanding for people. So for instance, I said before, the United States is 4.2% of the world's population. That means 95.8% of people on the planet ain't from here. And our norm and our reality are not normal or real for them. Worldwide, people of color are 90%, 9 out of every 10 people on the globe. Got over 1 billion in China. They call them yellow, some are, but a lot of them are beige. We might see them at the family reunion. India, that's another 1 billion. There's about all of them at the family reunion. Africa, coming up on 1 billion. So that white people are in a stark numerical minority in the world. 9 out of every 10 people in the world are people of color. So the Global Citizenship course is designed, I think, to help you understand that you live in a big world that is far more broad and diverse than anything you're used to.
That is correct. You must have been at that table because you got it down pat.
and so as a result, you need to change how you think so that you can function usefully, constructively, compassionately, decently in a world that is not like whatever little enclave you came from in Anne Arundel County or Montgomery County or somewhere in Ohio, New Mexico, wherever. The world is a lot bigger than that, and it's a lot bigger than you.
And even more focused, it's about shifting your thinking outside of what's being thought about at your dinner table, your dinner room table. Because again, and you mentioned this, that a lot of our children come to school, they interact out in the community because of what is being spoken at the dinner table or in the living room or watching the football game. And so yes, Anne Arundel County's Global Citizenship course definitely challenges our students to think outside of their personal norm.
Right.
Yeah.
And Sean, you mentioned the home, and so I need to, and I told the story in the book, I need to reference one of the people that I loved more than life itself in the world, and that was my grandma. So grandma was born in 1894. We weren't supposed to know that, but I found census records because on her tombstone it says 1897, but she was born in 1894 in Aberdeen, Mississippi, northeastern Mississippi. And so I remember hearing her one day referring to white people, and I guess maybe they must have been some lower economic class white people. And she just, without a hint of malice in her voice, said something about trash. And I'm, this is my grandmother who I adore. And I'm probably, I don't know, I was like 10, 12 years old, whatever. I'm like, trash. Well, see, I lived in a neighborhood with white people, the people across the alley. The mom was a Holocaust survivor with a tattooed number on her hand. And we had white folks, all kinds of people, ambassadors' family from other countries in my neighborhood. I went to school with, a very diverse community. I'm like, trash? You call human beings trash? But then fast forward to the movie, Remember the Titans. And y'all remember the big boy that came there to Northern Virginia from somewhere else, and he's hanging out with everybody, sitting down at the table with the brothers in the cafeteria. And they're like, "What you doing? What you doing here?" And he says, "I'm eating lunch." And it's like, but he truly, was not stuck on color. And there's a point when Coach Boone, Denzel Washington, is trying to tell him, "We're gonna get you some tutoring so that we can get you ready for college." And he said, "Coach, I'm poor white trash, such. I ain't never gonna get no C average and go to no college." That's what he said about himself. So that there's something twisted in our psyche in this country, that getting back to that mental illness question, Sean, you asked about, that a person would call himself, and by extension, his people, poor white trash. So that's something that has been considered acceptable. And my grandmother, as an African-American growing up in Mississippi, that there were white people that, well, they're trash. Nobody's trash. There might be people, and I'm not talking about white people this one, I'm talking about anybody. There might be people who act trashy, but they're not trash. And Donald Trump is a billionaire, supposedly, but he can act trashy. Hello. But that doesn't make him trash. Even our children, relatives, whatever, the one that's wilding out the worst and just, being a real pain to themselves and everybody else, they're not trash. They got issues they need to work on. Nobody is trash. So that again, the Global Citizenship course and trying to change mindsets and the words you say out of your mouth to refer to people and speak to people, that has to change.
So I want to, because I'm looking at our time, and I want to make sure that we honor the questions in our chat boxes. And so, Michelle, do we have another question in our chat?
Yeah, one more that would be appropriate for the end Q&A. Pastor T, this is from Miss Barbara, another one of our educators who I love to death. She asked, what prompted you to write the book?
Oh.
Okay, well, Michelle, one thing I love.
Wait a minute, Pastor T.
You don't love her to death. You love her to life.
Okay.
Oh, I like that. Love her to life. Yes.
I always say love to life, but
yeah, I know.
I just went backwards.
So, Sean, what were you saying?
I was going to say that's a good question, but I don't want you to spend the next 15 minutes talking about it. Sincere.
So that was Sean's way of saying, okay, you're kind of long-winded, kind of bring it back. So, Dr. Miles, I wrote the book, frankly, because if there's something that doesn't make sense to me, and as I said, I grew up in a diverse neighborhood. my first pastoral assignment, I'm a 30-year-old African-American male, the first African-American assigned to a majority white, elderly Southern white congregation. And the Lord knit us together like family for 6.5 years. So I have experienced things related to human ethnicity differently from others, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result of that, and then being in the military and playing on sports teams and all of that, it's like, okay, so what's all the hoopla over skin color? And so as I did the research, especially chapter 2, the scientific portion, it's like this whole focus on skin color is nonsense. It's less than 1/10 of 1% of our DNA. Why are we, if somebody said, okay, you can focus your attention on these 99.5 pennies here, or do you want to focus all your attention on this 1/10 of 1 penny?
Mm-hmm.
We would take the 99 9/10 because it's more. I just concluded that we needed to be focusing on more, did some research and reading to, kind of gather some anecdotes and other information, and tried to put it out there in a shorter book, because I know some of our folks don't like to read. So I made sure it was short, a shorter book that would be, I thought, easy to consume and perhaps help to begin people to help people to begin to change how they process and see some things.
Mm-hmm. Have you thought about an Audible book? Because people also process hearing more than reading the book.
There is an audio book.
Yay.
And yes, in my voice. And so if you go to our website at www, of course, stopfallingfortheokeedoke.com. Stop falling for the word for, not the number, the, and then OKEYDOKE, OKEYDOKE.com. And you can access and purchase the audio book as well, if you like.
Awesome. So Pastor T, I want to, again, I want to say your book, wise, informed, breathtaking. It was absolutely wonderful. And you said this, I've been quoting, and I've been quoting you with my cousin as I've been reading the book. Oh my God, did you know? But you talk about the end and you say, in a world torn with strife, sometimes manufactured, centuries old strife, some wonderful things can happen if we are willing to emerge from our separate corners, engage with one another, and do the hard work of relationship building for our mutual benefit. I thought that was such a powerful statement. And my mind always, of course, goes first to education, because that's where the majority of my time exists. And relationship building is probably one of the #1 strategies that we tell our teachers and our professionals to do, right? You got to build relationships with the children if they are going to work for you, and they're critical. And it's sad that not everybody knows how to build a relationship. Not everybody knows what that means. And so when you talk about that, anything could happen if we would just emerge from our separate selves, our separate corners, and engage with one another, that really the power that comes into play. And so before we close out, I wanted you to address that, because I thought it was such a powerful statement, especially in this space where we exist, where I don't know if I want to say leadership, but our leadership talks about bringing a country together and has really separated us into our own corners. What do you have to say about that?
I think that the Lord is using this season that we're in as a wake-up call. I forget what the product was, but for those of you who've been on the planet a while, you may remember the commercial about the cold slap in the face. This right here, 2020, is a cold slap in the face. And as Dr. King in 1967 was talking about those 3 isms: militarism, racism, and materialism. Mm-hmm. We have 3 pandemics that we're going through right now that have all been exposed. Number 1, of course, is Corona. and the need to modify our behavior in the face of this disease that does not care who you are. Ask Tom Hanks, ask, Melania Trump, Barron Trump, don't care who you are. Racism, or ethnicism, I would call it, and sort of the constant pressure that African Americans in the United States are under, just trying to live here without having a WB attached to whatever it is they're doing. WB, while black. Because think about it, barbecuing while black, sleeping while black, driving while black, jogging while black, etc. Just bird watching while black, reading a book in the park while black, all of those things, exhausting. All of those things are being exposed and captured on these things right here. And so as a result, people can't say it's our imagination anymore because we caught it on tape, we caught it on film. So that has to be dealt with. And then classism. People who had been middle class found out how quickly you can fall into poverty if something like this, hopefully once in a century pandemic comes along, government does not respond adequately or timely, and you end up getting evicted or foreclosed upon and all of those kinds of things. That, you were balling out, doing well, making a certain salary, whatever. And now you're in line over at Kingdom Celebration Church to get food for yourself and your household. This is a wake-up call, a cold slap in the face that, Sean, I think if we appropriate it properly, and that's why hopefully there may be a change in the tenor of our political discourse after this long election season is over, that come next, in the next few months, we can take it back down. And D. Rowell said the HIV and opioid crisis, and what was the other thing? The HIV, opioid, and economic crisis. Syndemic. Okay, thank you. I guess that's Randy. That sounds like something Dr. Rowell would write. Okay, but so for all of those things, they have kind of leveled the playing field a little bit for us to be able to look around, and it's like we see people that don't look like us, that are going through the same thing, that are catching the same kind of hell. To a certain extent, obviously, being brown, you're more at risk for getting shot for nothing. But in the other things, so that if we pay attention and understand that the answers are not going to come from Democrats or Republicans, because neither of them are taking their marching orders from us. And so we, the people, have to stand up and say, here's what you're going to do. And if you don't, we'll fire you. Nobody has a right to be in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, in the state legislature, in the governor's mansion, wherever. Nobody, the county administration building, nobody has a right. They got to earn that. And they earn that by enacting policies that benefit the greatest number of people for the greatest good. But since we've all been in this corona thing together and have looked around and seen people of all stripes going through it, if we're smart, we will decide that we don't want things to get back to normal, because frankly, they were never normal.
Absolutely.
That's just what we were used to. But instead, we want to find a new normal, a new normal where healthcare is a right and not a privilege.
Yes.
A new normal where proper nutrition is accessible to everyone, so that 40% of our children do not need some sort of needs-based assistance to survive. People keep talking about food stamps. There haven't been food stamps in years. There's no such thing as food stamps. But they don't want to use the acronym, because then you got to focus on what it's about. Supplemental, and here it is, nutrition assistance program.
Yep.
So that when we stop falling for the okey-doke and stop thinking that our savior is going to be some Democrat or some Republican somewhere, the savior is you getting together with other people in community, such that there is too much power in you to be ignored. And don't get sucked into some Democrat or Republican structure or confine. Don't do that. You work with like-minded people, and then you bring pressure to bear on the folks that are in that system. Or if they're unresponsive, run yourself, so that we can make changes to make this a truly more perfect union that respects individuals, that respects community, that respects decency, that looks after our young. Said in the book that you can tell a lot about a society by how it treats its young and its aged. Mm-hmm. We are failing in both of those measures.
Wow, thank you so much.
And I don't know about you, but I'm tired. I'm tired of that. We need a change.
I think we all are tired. We all are tired. But you have done a wonderful thing today, and that is to inform us, to teach us, to stop falling for the okie doke. And so, Pastor T, I just want to thank you for your words. I want to thank Asbury United Methodist. I want to thank our Facebook and our Zoom audience for joining us today. And I want to thank our Big Read contributors and sponsors, the National Endowment for the Arts, Big Read, Anne Arundel County, managed by the Arts Midwest, Chesapeake Children's Museum, and our chair of Big Read, Anne Arundel County, Ms. Debbie Wood, Arts Council of Anne Arundel County, Coons Toyota of Annapolis, City of Annapolis, and the Maryland State Art Council. Thank you so much this afternoon for joining us on this much needed discussion. And remember, stop falling for the okie doke.